Welcome back everybody to another episode of Direct Comparison. In today's episode, we're going to look at 2015's open world action RPG, The Witcher 3, and see how its visuals hold up against Ubisoft's latest open world adventure, Assassin's Creed Odyssey. For this comparison, both games will be run on the PC platform with their visuals pushed up as high as possible at a 1440p resolution. But for the sake of retaining the cleanest possible image, the motion blur options will be disabled. Alright, so to start this off, let's begin by looking at the texture and model complexity of the main characters from both games. This is actually pretty surprising considering The Witcher 3 released 3 years ago, and still manages to hold up surprisingly well. The geometry, texture resolution, and level of detail is almost exactly on par with what's featured in the latest Assassin's Creed title. But if we look extremely close, we can see things a bit more clearly. First, we have the facial hair. Yes, obviously the White Wolf has white hair, and that's not what we're focusing on. But the actual hairs themselves don't look as believable on Geralt as they do on Alexios. And I think this has to do with the shadow implementation. The white hair on Geralt seems to just float on his face and doesn't cast any sort of shadows, whereas the hair on Alexios feels like a genuine part of the character model. Now, the clear explanation for why this is the case is that The Witcher 3's hair is somewhat dynamic, and can be grown out throughout your adventures. Alexios' beard, however, is completely static, and will not change throughout the game. The next thing you'll notice is the character's skin. While the texture for the face appears slightly crisper in The Witcher 3, it does appear much more natural in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, thanks to the improved lighting and superior shadowing again. This tends to be the case with many of the elements between both games, with The Witcher 3 having much better textures, but Assassin's Creed still having some better shadow and lighting. But I have to say, the textures in The Witcher 3 are absolutely insane, especially on small, insignificant details like the hilt on the player's sword, for example. I mean, just look at that. Assassin's Creed never comes close to that level of detail and quality. Moving on from our main character, let's take a look at their trusty steeds. And just like our comparison with Assassin's Creed and Red Dead Redemption, Assassin's Creed's horses fail to impress. Roach from The Witcher 3 might be an idiot when you try to call him to your side, but he still looks much better than the lifeless horses available in the world of Odyssey. The texture quality is once again vastly superior in The Witcher 3, and the model design of the horse itself appears more natural. We also need to talk about the character's animations. The walking animations look fine for both games, but it's interesting to see the approach taken in defining the character's personality and how they walk. Geralt, for example, seems to walk more confidently, with his chest and arms out. Alexios, however, seems to walk a bit more conserved, which makes sense considering the game typically always encourages the player to move at full speed to get around. The running animations, however, look a little bit better in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. The way the character throws his arms back feels more natural than the conserved, awkward running Geralt does. The same is true for the swimming animations. The swimming animation in The Witcher 3 feels incredibly stiff and doesn't give the player the feeling of traversing underwater, whereas AC Odyssey's animations do exactly that. But once we turn back to looking at the horses, The Witcher 3 again takes the spotlight with vastly superior riding animations and movement. Assassin's Creed games overall have never had very good horse riding designs, though one could argue the horse isn't as important a tool in the Assassin's Creed games as it is in games like The Witcher or Red Dead Redemption. Next up, let's look at the environmental textures. Just like the character model comparisons, we see superior textures overall in The Witcher 3. The grass is one of the clearest examples, where despite the zoom being identical, the texture is much higher res than in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. The same is true for various stone walls and rocks. However, despite this lower environmental texture resolution in Odyssey, the actual level of detail and quality of some things in the world, like this dirt road for example, feels a bit more advanced, and the shadowing applied to these small details really helps it feel more three-dimensional. Which brings us to our next topic, the lighting. Assassin's Creed leads the way when it comes to its lighting, with superior global illumination, more advanced God ray implementation, and more natural lighting overall. It can feel a bit blown out at points, especially in the early mornings and late evenings, but for the most part, the lighting and color quality in Assassin's Creed Odyssey feels like a genuine step up from The Witcher 3. I don't necessarily mind the lighting in The Witcher 3, however the one complaint I do have about it is the weird fake HDR implementation, where the image feels more washed out when there's a direct light source on screen. It's a shame because the lighting generally looks phenomenal and the color quality is still great. That being said, I do think The Witcher 3 does a much better job with interior lighting. Dark caves feel genuinely dark, and the reaction to the torchlight is much better. I will say that both games get the actual light from the torch wrong, with The Witcher 3 having this weird yellow LED glow to it, and Odyssey having this weird pink hue, but the way shadows move and react to the torch in The Witcher 3 is much more impressive. Moving on from lighting, we have shadow quality. The time of day doesn't necessarily match up here, but you still get the general idea just the same. The shadows in The Witcher 3 have much softer edges to them, while AC Odyssey appears slightly sharper overall. It's difficult to really say which is better here. Personally, I have no problem with either of them. But what I will say is that the ambient occlusion used in Assassin's Creed is much more impressive, with small objects and details in the environment casting more shadows and making the world appear much more detailed as a result. Next up, we have special effects. The Witcher 3 generally leads the way in this department thanks to Geralt's ability to shoot fire from his fingertips and the obvious focus on visual elements like this during development. The fire quality, something that actually looked pretty decent in AC Origins, looks ugly in Odyssey, and doesn't compare to the excellent fire design in The Witcher 3. However, the water in Odyssey looks 100 times better than the water in The Witcher. The Witcher 3's water has always looked strange, almost like some thick oil soup with wave simulation that feels slowed down for some reason. Even the way it interacts with Geralt feels off. The water in AC Odyssey, however, looks incredible, especially the impressive wave simulation out on the ocean, or even the smaller bodies of water inland. Reflective properties are more impressive, and the fluidity of the water surface feels more consistent with real water properties. But Witcher 3 steals the crown back with its superior vegetation density and design. The world of The Witcher 3 often looks much more impressive overall thanks to the wind simulation that causes almost all the vegetation in the world to move. The grass fields are loaded with thousands of small 2D grass sprites that all interact with the player and looks really smooth. I especially love the way the large wheat fields move around the player and his horse as they ride through it. That being said, larger vegetation like bushes fail to interact with the player at all, which is where AC Odyssey shines. Because of the stealth mechanics that allow players to hide in tall shrubbery, the bushes and large wheat fields in Odyssey react realistically to the player. And I never noticed this before, but you can even see Alexios brushing his hand over the grass as he peacefully walks through it, which is a pretty cool touch. And finally, let's listen to some sound comparisons. Which game do you think has the better sound mixing and overall audio quality?
We'll have order at last! Long live Radovid! Hail the mage hunters! Once we're gone.
And that wraps up this episode of Direct Comparison. This is one of the more close comparisons I've conducted between two completely different games. The Witcher 3 is one of the most impressive looking video games I've ever played, and Ubisoft's Assassin's Creed property has only just caught up with it visually, but still fails to deliver high quality textures or special effects in some instances. But The Witcher 3's older lighting design is starting to show, and the stiff animations, which felt awkward even back in 2015, are feeling even more stiff every year. But what do you guys think? Do you think The Witcher 3 still looks better? Let me know in the comment section, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this posted every week.